to the Mavs Fans for Life podcast. I am Landon Thomas, joined by my co-host Shahnavaz and Makhani. Shahnavaz, we're through 5 games of the Mavs regular season, so we'll deep dive into that. We'll talk on this episode about Luka Dončić's struggles to begin the season, the slow starts from the Mavs starting 5 as a whole, and then the rebounding concerns and foul trouble that the Mavs are getting into. The Mavs play tomorrow against the Orlando Magic, and obviously we saw the news with Paolo, so hopefully he gets back in speedy recovery, because he was on a monster start to the season, which will ultimately help the Mavericks. But Shahnavaz, let's start just getting straight to it. Luka Dončić, obviously coming off the finals, a lot of expectations for the Mavs. Seems like Luka has like the best odds for MVP the last 3 years. This season it seems like he's finally going to prep himself to get it, but he's starting slow. He talked about missing preseason and finally finding some rhythm in the fourth quarter against the Rockets, where he had 15 points, 6 of 8 shooting. He had the ball more, again, bringing it up more. But what has been your assessment on Luka Dončić so far through the first 5 games?
I think you just said it. I think number one, missing preseason definitely hurt.
Yeah.
You don't, say what you will about, the NBA preseason and training camp is not like the NFL where, nobody plays and you kind of just jump right back into things.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely critical, especially when you're integrating new pieces to your team. When you bring in guys like Klay Thompson, Najee Marshall, Quentin Grimes, you need that kind of consistency. You need that ability to play with them. It's different than training camp, being able to be out there and play games and get your legs under you. So for Luka coming off the finals and then playing with Slovenia and then, really not having any semblance of a preseason, this is kind of his preseason. I kind of, look back at the Rangers last year with Corey Seager and kind of how he missed spring training and struggled the first couple of months of the season. It takes a while to kind of get back into game shape and get your legs under you. And once he did, he went on a tear. So I think the lack of preseason definitely hurts. We've seen it. I mean, his shot looks flat. He's missing easy looks at the rim as well. And that just comes with time. It's not anything that I'm overly concerned about. I think it's going to take time for him to kind of get back into game shape. And like you said, the fourth quarter against the Rockets was definitely a good sign going forward. And I also think the change in offensive system. I mean, we've seen PJ bring the ball up more. We've seen other guys, Kyrie's bringing the ball up more. We've seen it in Klay's hands and Najee Marshall's hands. So I think that, Jason Kidd's trying different things, to maybe get the ball out of Luka's hands a little bit and kind of keep him fresh. Whether that continues or not, we'll see. Maybe you kind of go back to Luka bringing it up just to get him back into rhythm. That's going to be interesting to see how the Mavericks work that into the game plan the next week or so. But I think it's a combination of both of those things. It's not anything that I'm too concerned about, because we've seen him turn it on against Minnesota. We saw him turn it on against Houston. So it's not like it's a full game stretch where this is a struggle for him. It's really at the beginning of games. And as he, gets more involved in the game, we see him turn it on in the second half. So it's going to be interesting to see, but lack of preseason and definitely kind of this new change in scheme, I think, are the two biggest factors.
Yeah, and the first thing I like about Luka is he's taking accountability. He's saying that he's admitting that he's having a bad start to the regular season. He's averaging 27 points, 27.2 points. He's shooting 38% from the floor. Obviously, he's a high efficient player over the career. He's shooting 46.9%. And then also from threes, he's shooting 29.2%. Rebounds are good, 8.4, but the assists are low, 6.2. So, when you look at his production to start the season, I agree with you. I think it does take a little time at the beginning of the season when you have a new offensive system in place, especially when you don't have preseason. You're really thrown into the fire. I'm not making excuses for him, because he is playing not up to his level of performance. But, when you are getting the ball in different spots of the floor in the half court, because usually, like you said, he's bringing the ball up a lot of the times last year, all the way through the finals. And now you're having a new system in place where Jason Kidd wants more players bringing up the ball so you can have a Luka in the playoffs, healthy and not having that physical wear and tear on him throughout the course of the season, because every team is going to put their best player and guard him full court. And, that does take a toll on him physically. So when I look at that, you're getting the ball in different spots, and obviously, like you said, his shot is not where it should be. It's flat and it's short at times. So I think there should be a mixture of both. I mean, obviously, it's good to see other players, be elevated. Like you mentioned, Najee, you see Quentin as well, Spencer, PJ, and then of course Kyrie's gonna get the ball. But there's also a point where he's a top 2, top 3 at worst, best player in the world. So you want the ball in those type of players' hands. And also, he's a point guard. So, you want him to have those full court passes sometimes, instead of, other guys bringing it up all the way to the half court and getting set, because sometimes he makes those full court passes that people aren't even looking. So, his assists are low right now with 6 assists a game. And I think there has to be a compromise. I don't think it has to be cold turkey. I think, especially what we can get into it with the slow starts, but I think you should start the game with the ball in Luka's hands. And then the second and third quarter, you see other guys bring it up. And then in the fourth quarter, when, the lights are bright, you go back to him, which we seen in the Houston game, you seen in the Timberwolves game. You can go back to him in the fourth. You can start with him in the first, but you want to see more mixture of other guys in the second and third throughout the totality of the game to have those opportunities of, really bringing it up and being creative and being a ball handler, because that's what they brought those players, especially Najee. You could see the potential of him. They brought those type of players in to be that and take the load off of Luka.
Yeah, and we saw that last year too. I think we saw Luka, kind of dominating the first quarter, and then when he would rest, Kyrie would kind of take over the second, and then you'd get a mix of both in the fourth. I think it's, I think the lack of preseason, I think Jason Kidd's trying to integrate him, a little bit better. And I also think, I like what you said about Luka taking accountability. I think there's a push definitely to have him play off ball a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think to your point of, people picking him up half court or full court, even in the postseason, we saw Lou Dort do that a lot, and it really took a toll by the time, the Dallas got to the finals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think having him play off ball a little bit more is kind of in preparation for that. I think, this team definitely has championship aspirations. And so if you're going to have Luka bringing the ball up the court every possession in the postseason, he's going to get beat. He's going to get beat up a lot. So kind of conserving some of that in the regular season, I think is wise. Has that accounted for the slow starts? Maybe. I mean, we'll have to see kind of what that looks like over the next few weeks, as he gets his legs under him. And I think the low assist totals, I mean, they're not integrating Klay Thompson very much in the first quarter. Klay is kind of, I think in the first quarter, you're trying to get a lot of other guys going. I think that's more faith in Klay Thompson that, he can be trusted obviously later in games and doesn't need that. He's not like Tim Hardaway Jr. where he's got to get into rhythm. He's constantly, I think there's a trust there where whenever he gets the ball, he's going to make a play or he's going to shoot the ball well. So, I think that accounts for some of the low assist numbers as well. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into that, and I think it's all in prep for next year. I think the Mavericks look back at the finals run that they had, how beat up Luka was going into that Celtics series, and it's like we've got to make sure that doesn't happen, because there's no way they're going to win a title if Luka's not on his A game come April.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a good point. So it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of the ball out of his hands, and then also players not making shots.
Yeah.
So if they make more shots, he would have more assists. So I agree with you there. It's just when you look at this team in their slow starts, it takes time when you have a player like Klay Thompson, and also credit to the opposing team's defenses. When they're really taking Lively and Gafford off those lobs, and they're also the last few games, because the first few games Clay was getting those shots at the beginning of the game, but other teams are also trying to take Klay Thompson out of games now too. If you look back on the last two games specifically, he's not getting a lot of looks. Also, it comes to the players getting him the ball more. And Jason Kidd talked about that. You got to find ways to get him in the flow, even if he doesn't shoot it. Got to find ways to just get him in the flow of the offense. But also, teams are face guarding him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They're cutting him off of screens a lot, and they're getting physical with him as well. So once Luka gets back to being Luka, I think it's gonna make everything easier. Obviously, the opposing defenses, because right now they're playing a lot of one-on-one because he's struggling.
Yeah.
And once he's back to being Luka, you can't play him one-on-one. So that opens up the lob back, and then that opens up Klay Thompson more because you have to have all eyes on deck when Kyrie and Luka's being Luka, and then you got the lob, and then PJ's doing his floaters, or he's going to go in flashes when making threes.
Yeah, and it's a vote of confidence for Klay Thompson that the respect that other teams have for him. Seeing how he played the first couple of games, and now you're seeing, like you said, they're not letting him get around screens. They're kind of hedging against any off ball screens that the Mavericks are setting up for Klay. And I agree. As soon as Luka starts starts going on a tear, whether that's this week, next month, they're going to have to start sending help defenders, and that's going to open up the rest of the offense. And this is a very different scenario, I think, Landon. Like, we've seen the slow start, it feels like, every game. And not once have I been worried this season. Like, even through 5 games, like, it's been, we saw the slow start against San Antonio, and then just the barrage in the third quarter that, Kyrie and Luka and Klay, leading the Mavericks back. The Phoenix game was kind of like, there was a lot of, officiating, you could say questionable officiating in that game. Even Houston, even though it was a loss, the Mavericks were down 20 and still came back.
23. Yeah.
And it wasn't a situation where you're like, man, they're definitely going to lose this. Like, they came back in the fourth quarter and ended up making it a closer game. This is the first time in a while I felt like, okay, even with the slow start, like, it's okay, because we know the scenario, the situation that they're in with Luka missing preseason, with the integration of a couple of new players. And I think you obviously lose some athleticism not having Derrick Jones Jr., who, kind of provided a different, kind of angle to this offense.
The easy baskets.
Yeah. And so you're having to work a little bit more for some of the stuff. But to your point, as soon as Luka turns it on, you're going to see a much different offense. And I think those slow starts are going to go in. I think the lobs are going to come back. Klay being open, Quentin Grimes being open. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And as a result, Luka's assist numbers are going to shoot way up.
Yeah, and I also think even though they lost that last game, I think being at home is going to help them because they're practicing more. If you don't have that travel day, like I said, they got the Magic tomorrow. They got the Pacers coming up Monday, which is a back-to-back. Wednesday, they got the Bulls, and then Friday, they can try to get some redemption against the Suns. So, you really have to take care of business on this homestand. Obviously, you lose the first game of a 5-game homestand. But I want to ask you, Shahnavaz, so obviously, it's only 5 games. You just mentioned it as well that, watching those games, you weren't worried about the slow starts because the Mavs did pick themselves up in pretty much all those games, and they came up short in a couple of them. But how long does it take for you to start being concerned on these slow starts?
I've always given it till December. I think it takes a good month and a half, 2 months to really kind of figure out where a team is struggling and where they need to kind of get a little bit better. Obviously, there's different situations. You look at a team like the Nuggets, and you can kind of tell right off the bat that, like, oh God, this is going to be a tough year.
Yeah.
But especially when your star players missed the preseason, and you're integrating, really 3 key rotation players again. I mean, we saw this last year with the Mavericks, right? When you bring in Derrick Jones.
I mean, with Spencer, even though he's been here, he's still playing with new players.
Yeah, I think it takes time. There's something to be said about, you see the teams that have continuity that have gotten off to really good starts, like the Lakers, like the Celtics, like teams that have been together that really didn't add any critical pieces because maybe they didn't have to or they felt like they didn't need to, versus teams like the Mavericks that, you're bringing in new guys. Like, it's going to take some time. And when your best player didn't really have a full off season and didn't really have that preseason work, that's a 5-10 game swing where it's going to take time to really get back into the groove of things. And so I always give it till December before if truly evaluating and saying, okay, now there's got to, now there's cause for concern. Give it time, let things get integrated. The coaching staff has got to work through their rotations and figure out, which players fit better with others. And again, I keep saying it, but going back to Luka being out, like, you understood kind of that fit before, but now you add in Luka Dončić to that, and it kind of changes the whole dynamic of who fits where, right? And what do those rotations look like, and who plays best with each other. And so that takes a couple months to kind of figure out.
Yeah, I think you can look at this as, because there's an 82 game season, and what I try to do is look at it in increments of 10. And because the last 2 games are pretty much you're going all in for a playoff seed, or they're just throwaway games to get to the playoffs. So, I look at it in increments of 10. So each 10 games, you want to go at least 6-4, because 8 times 6 is 48. So you at least have 48 wins. So you want to go at least 6-4. So that's why I want to look at this, you analyze it game by game, because, you don't want to jump to conclusions over 5 games of the regular season when it's an 82 game season, but you also want to critique when you see things that are going wrong. So I want to really see after 10 games how they can bounce back on these slow starts. So in that, the rest of this homestand is most of that. So I want to see how they do tomorrow. I want to see them play with energy. Obviously, this is a starting lineup, so if you want to tinker it, you can look at Lively starting, but there really needs to not be a tinker at this moment after 5 games. So I'm not worried, like you, but I also want to see how they do after the first 10 games, and then really assess what's going on here regarding the slow starts, regarding should the ball be in Luka's hands, just to start the game, to make easy baskets with his vision. I mean, he is, if it's not Jokic, he's the best passer in the whole league. So, you want to get easy baskets and people going, especially Klay Thompson. Maybe that's why you see, obviously we talked about a little bit why Klay's shot attempts are going down at the beginning of games, like they, in comparison to the first 2 games, 3 games actually. But also, you want to see if it really is a testament to Luka's struggles, because if he was playing like Luka and then the Mavs were having these same issues, then you can start to really deep dive into it a little more.
Yeah.
But once he is back to Luka, I mean, he's going to be back to Luka, then you could see if some of these issues are mitigated. And I think that's what excites the team, excites the staff, and what excites the people observing these games, for tomorrow, and see how they do.
Yeah, and I think this part of the slow starts, it's, look, the Mavericks are getting good looks. It's not like they're taking bad shots.
Yeah, that's what Kid said. Yep.
They're getting good looks. They're just not falling, and it's one of those things where it happens. We've seen it, at various times throughout the course of the season. Like, sometimes the shots are just not going to fall. You look back to opening night against San Antonio. I mean, that first quarter and a half was brutal because the Mavericks were getting everything they wanted. Nothing was falling. And then as soon as you get the confidence once 1 or 2 or 3 go down, and then it's, you turn on the Jets and it's like, all right, let's go. So I think, if there were, to your point, if Luka was at full strength, or if he was, prime Luka, and they were still struggling, or if they just weren't getting good looks, things like that, like, we could start having that conversation, I think. But, they're missing wide open shots. It's course correction. It's going to happen. They're going to fall. We've seen it fall in the second half. No, it's just I'm not concerned with the shot selection at all.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, the numbers are not showing the true value of this roster because this is a better shooting team than last year, but they're just missing shots. And I think you would rather have Luka struggling and being 3-2 than Luka playing outstanding and everyone else struggling and them being 3-2. So I
Absolutely.
think you're in a better mindset. You're in a better, posture of this early season and saying, okay, when Luka kicks it on, because I mean, the last 6 years goes to show like this is just him missing preseason and this is just him getting back in the rhythm. So Shahnavaz, let's talk about the rebounding concerns and the foul trouble of this team. It's another, concern early on after the first 5 games, in addition to the slow start. So, first of all, rebounding, the team is 15th in rebounds. And then also foul trouble. They're 7th in most fouls in the league. So let's start with rebounding. What's your concern there? Obviously, Şengün was rebounding a lot in
Yeah.
the last couple of games. I mean, you really haven't seen the bigs specifically, but just in totality as a team, what concerns you with the rebounding?
I think there's a little concern. I mean, I think you brought up the side. Luka's still averaging like 8 rebounds, but
Yeah.
again, I think losing Derek Jones Jr. I think that's a big piece of.
Mm,
He was another guy who could rebound the ball very well, and
yeah.
Najee's not that guy. Clay's not that guy, so you're going to lose a little bit of that, and I think more of that responsibility falls now onto Gafford and Lively and PJ and so you kind of assume you kind of understand like you're going to lose some of those rebounding battles when it comes down to it. But if you look back at the 5 games, you and I were talking about this offline, the Mavericks, if you look at total rebounds, I mean, San Antonio, they were out rebounded by 2. Phoenix, they were out rebounded by 1. If you go to the Jazz game early last week, they were tied in total rebounds for that game against the Timberwolves. They actually won. They only lost the rebound battle by 2. It was really the Rockets game where there was a huge outlier, and that was they were out rebounded by like 13.
Hmm.
You know, really, it hasn't been as much of a struggle, I think, as we visually as we see. I just think when you lose a guy like Derek Jones Jr. who can do some of those things
Yeah.
that aren't in the skill set of a Klay Thompson, I think that hurts. And so the Mavericks are going to have to find different ways to to kind of figure that out. Is that Gafford and Lively kind of taking more of that burden, or PJ taking more of that responsibility on? That's to be determined.
Yeah, and that's a good point with PJ. He's stepped it up in the rebounding. I mean, he's grabbing some of those reboundings
Yeah,
around rebounds and showing his length and athleticism. Because I asked a kid yesterday what attributes to better rebounding for the team. Is it just being in better position, boxing out, or is it just the will, the want to? And he says more the latter is just the will and the want to. I mean, you can have better positioning, but you got to have that will and aggressiveness to go get the rebound. And you just mentioned it with the Houston Rockets game. I mean, Steven Adams is just a bully. I
yeah,
mean, he
God,
is physically. Şengün is a great rebound, but Adams is hard to box out and he's physical. So it does lead me to the point where it kind of does fall on Lively and Gafford because they are good rebounders, but they struggle against bigger physical, rebounder bigs in the league. So you want to see them have a little more aggression towards rebounds, but also that kind of leads into the foul trouble as well. But I like how you said Derek Jones Jr. because I wasn't even thinking about that. That's a great point. Uh, he he was sacrificing his body for some of
yeah,
those rebounds last year, and and he has the athleticism to do it. But sometimes he was just flying around getting those not only defensive rebounds but offensive rebounds and giving the Mavs more possessions offensively. So that is an adjustment. So I like that you said that because a lot of people compare Najee to Derek Jones Jr. because they really are. Because when you think about Klay Thompson and he's really taking the THJ role, even though he's starting. And then, you look at Quentin Grimes with Josh Green, but they're different players. Najee Marshall and Derrick Jones Jr. are different players. So you can't look at athleticism. You can't compare the two. You can't compare the two because, Derrick Jones Jr. might have more rebounds. He might have more points and more because of more lobs and stuff, but taking more threes. But then you also have to look at the positive with Najee as well. Like he's a much better playmaker. Like he can actually dribble up the whole court and initiate plays. And his defense, I think you're starting to see his defense is just as good. The last 2 games, like when he's more settled into his role and just playing with a new team. I mean, he's been on the Pelicans, 4 years? So you get into that role. It takes, like you said, it takes a month or 2 to get settled into a role. And it took Derrick Jones Jr. like half a season to get settled into his role because he struggled the first 2 months.
Yeah, we didn't see him, really kind of take over until like January.
Yeah. So that's what. Yeah, go ahead.
I think part of it as well, like, you look at kind of the rebounding struggles, it goes back to the Mavs missing shots. Like if you're going to shots that are clanging off the rim, or even some of these layups that Luka's missing, these floaters, that's just easy rebounds for the defense, So as those shots go in, the rebounding numbers are going to go down. Like it's a numbers game, right? Everything's kind of attributed to other stats. And so, I think you'll start to see that change a little bit more as well. And the Mavericks like to get out and run in transition. So you're not throwing a lot of bodies, at the backboard trying to get rebounds. You're really relying on PJ and your centers to do that while the other guys, are running up the court.
Agree. So, Shahnavaz, what about fouls? So that is a big concern. The Mavs as a team are 7th in the league for most fouls. What's been your assessment watching this team on the fouling?
I think it's the NBA's fault, to be honest. And here's the thing. We saw this last year. The refs were calling everything super physical the first part of the year. Come February, they started backing off, and that's when you saw the Mavericks really start, with their aggression and the way that they play offense and defense. You really started to see, the strength of that team come out. And so I think the refs are back to calling everything super physical.
Yeah.
I think the Mavs play a physical style of defense. I think they have to, right? Just with the way that they're constructed. And so, unfortunately, that's going to lead to more fouls. And some of them are ticky-tack fouls, but you've seen it in other games too. It's not just with the Mavericks. I think the refs are doing what they've been asked to do. They're calling fouls that I don't think we saw called late last year. And I think you have to kind of remember we're still in the beginning of the year. And this, as the year goes on, I expect that to kind of course correct and go back to the way it was, once you get in the playoff push. But for now, like the Mavericks are going to have to, kind of be very careful about, some of these reach-in fouls that are getting called, some of these blocking fouls. Like you kind of have to understand that if that's the way that the refs are going to call it, you have to kind of change your style to mirror that.
Yeah. And, I usually say there's no excuses, but at the same time, when you have a whole arena chanting "ref, you suck" in the fifth game of the season, that tells you the picture of what's going on here.
Yeah.
And it's a mixture of both. The Mavs have to play better, but also the officiating is very hit or miss and not consistent. And that's the biggest thing I wish the officials or the hierarchies or the executives of officiating in the NBA would just have it consistent across the boards. When refs' names, like that should be the biggest issue. Like fans, obviously players and coaches, they know their names. They can see them all the time, but like fans should not know officials' names. And that's, the image of where we're at in this league. Like when games happen and you see the officiating, who's officiating, what type of game is going to be. And that's tough for a team when one game the Mavs can be physical, especially the bigs. And then the next game, you can't touch them at all. So the reaching, I agree with you. The reaching has to stop.
Yeah.
Because that's going to get called no matter what. But just like the ticky-tack stuff, like when you see Lively go up but he's a little leaning forward with his hands. Like,
It's
just let that
ridiculous.
go.
It's
Yeah.
so infuriating to see him like put his hand. I mean, he's done such
He's
a great job.
trying. Yeah.
He's done. I remember when he first came in last year, and we were like, just put your hands up. You don't have to be jumping every time. Like you're a foot taller than everyone on the court. And he's done a really good job of keeping his footing, putting his arms up, but because he's leaning an inch forward, they're calling a foul. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, just let him play.
Yeah, and we don't want to see free throws. I mean, that's the biggest frustration. I mean, obviously, if it's a foul, it's a foul. You got to call it, but at the same time, it's the NBA. These are the best of the best. You want to see them go at it, and you don't want to see free throws all game, and that just takes away, it takes away the enjoyment of the game. Uh, in the fourth quarter, that's fine, because it's a close game. You got to call a call. But, in the first three quarters, I mean, some of that stuff you can let go. It's a regular season. It's not playoffs. Well, playoffs, they let it all go. But it's just, I want consistency. Can you imagine? Well, there might be a lot of injuries, but can you imagine if the regular season was officiated like the playoffs? How good basketball would be?
140 to 130 games would be awesome. Just let them play, man.
It'll be going at it as well, the best of the best, But yeah, the reaching has to stop. But the ticky tack stuff, where you can say no foul, you can say foul, just let that go.
Two words that'll never go together: NBA and consistency.
Each game you watch is a whole. That's why that it is so entertaining, because you don't know what you're gonna get.
There you go. Yeah.
On each game that you watch. But
never know.
What was funny? What was funny was yesterday. Like today, they went back to rap, but like yesterday, all practice they were doing gospel and worship music.
Yeah.
Yes, and Kyrie was he was in charge of the aux that day. But that was funny because PJ, he was talking about sometimes you can't let rap beat up your ears all the time. And I asked him, I was like, you think this gospel and worship music will help with the foul trouble? Because, you listen to rap all the time and it's so aggressive, hyped up, but when you listen to gospel, you're like at peace where you can let some of these reach-ins, go. He said, definitely. He said it'll smooth it out.
Oh my God, I love it.
I like just players just going, even though they lost, like they can still be human and they can still enjoy what they do and have a smile, every once in a while.
Because it's one game, like it's the fifth game of an 82 game season. Like it's not,
exactly.
Just take a step back, like collect yourselves.
So Shahnavaz, speaking of take a step back and collecting yourself, the Mavs do have a game tomorrow, a back-to-back. I mentioned it earlier, but the next two games, they got the Magic on Sunday tomorrow, and then they got the Pacers on Monday. What are you looking forward to most? I mean, obviously you can summarize this podcast, but what are you specifically looking for the Mavs to bounce back in tomorrow's game against the Magic?
With Paolo out, this is a good chance for Dallas to get in a win here. Paolo's the Magic best player, and like you said, prayers to him, and hopefully he gets better soon because he's an exciting player to watch. And
yes,
already went for 50, this year. So hopefully Paolo gets back, but just more consistency from Luka. Like let's start to see him getting his legs under him. Let's start to see him having the game. We know he loves playing against Franz Wagner. And so I want to see, him kind of attack the Wagner brothers and show why he should be the MVP this year. And because tomorrow's a good chance to sneak out a win, because the Pacers are a good team, a really, really good defensive team, good physical team. And of course, old Coach Carlisle coming back to Dallas is always fun. So tomorrow night especially is a chance for Dallas to get a win under their belt, get some momentum going in as they continue this homestand.
And there's no better way for Luka getting back his magic against Orlando,
Get that.
And then also you want to see him. That's my what I want to see as well, because I want to see him get back to being Luka against his former coaches. Jamal Mosley was very close to him as an assistant coach. And you can't have a stinker against Jamal Mosley, because he's going to tell you. He's gonna talk to you during the game about it. And then also Rick Carlisle, he coached them as well. So his first coach, you really want to set the tone for the rest of the season, getting back to yourself against these two teams. And it is a back-to-back. And I think you want to see the first quarter, you want to see the Mavericks on top of the Magic having, obviously more energy, Luka being back to Luka, and Clay having at least one or two threes, just getting back to what they were the first few games. So that's what I want to see. You got to have Luka, shine out in front of Mosley and Carlisle.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, everyone. So hopefully the Mavs bounce back, but we just want to thank y'all for tuning in to the Mavs Fans for Life podcast. A lot of things going on early in the season. The Mavs are 3-2 in the first 5 games, but like we said, you can kind of take that for what it's worth with all the things going on in the duration of these games. So, Shahnavaz, last word. How do the Mavs finish record-wise in the next 4 games to finish this homestand?
Well, next 4 games, I'm going to go 3-1.
Okay.
I'm going to say the Mavs go 3-1. I'm going to put a loss to the Pacers in there. I just think the Pacers are the way, and second night of a back-to-back against a super physical team like that. And I think the Mavs generally struggle against stretch bigs. So Miles Turner always presents problems. Give me 3-1. And then the Mavericks get redemption against the Suns. Should beat the Bulls. Should beat the Magic. I think the Pacers is a close loss, but hey, 3-1 on a homestand, I'll take it.
Yeah, it's tough because I want to give a different answer, and I'll tell you what I was going to go with. I was going to go with 4-0.
Oh.
Yeah, I think this Rockets game really hit them. Obviously, you saw it in the fourth quarter. I think they will carry that fourth quarter over and really get on a high note. But I'm going to go 3-1 as well. And I think they're going to come up short in the Suns' redemption.
Okay.
So I think they'll go I think they'll win the next 3 games and have a close down to the wire game against Suns.
That's fair.
All right, so you see our social usernames. Make sure y'all follow us and also like and subscribe. We appreciate y'all tuning in to the Mavs Fans for Life podcast. Goodbye, everyone.